Welcome back to Training Well Done, your podcast on the what, the why, and the how of quality training. I'm your co-host, Coach Donald,
I'm Coach Tim.
and we are your coaches and sports scientists, who are going to be here talking about the case for single leg training. But it's Monday. How you doing?
It's Monday. I'm doing great. It's been a busy day so far. It's going to be a busy afternoon, but all things are going well. How about yourself?
I'm pretty groovy. I got up really early. I got a workout in. I had a restful Sunday. It was semi-eventful, but it was restful. I ended up waking up an hour and a half earlier almost. I was like, all right, well, I'm up. So it's been a good day. I got a lift
Might as
in,
well.
got some reading, work, got some work done. I took a nap even at lunch, like at lunchtime.
Oh, nice. Nice. No, shout out to Coach Donald for everybody who's listening. I think I get to the gym early to get ready for morning classes. Coach Donald was already there at his desk by the time I rolled in at 6 o'clock. So kudos to you, man.
Now you took a train trip this weekend. How was that?
I did. I did. I went to Philly for the marathon weekend of events that they host out there. Um, had a good time. It was a really well executed event. Um, Great weather. Um, I'm not so much like a big city person, so like Philly's a little bit on the bigger end for me.
Mm.
But for a few days I can manage it, and I love taking the train out there because you can just kind of outsource the driving and sit back, relax, read a book, catch up on some work, do whatever you need to do. So.
The train is so cool. That has been my. When did I first take a train? Last year? I think it was late last year. I was in Texas. Um, the train is awesome. That is
Love
my
it.
one of my favorite new modes of
Love the
transportation to get
train.
around.
Yeah, 100%. It's affordable. Even your coach seats, you got plenty of leg room, and like I said, you don't have to worry about the driving.
You can get up and walk around.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
on a plane, you're in this little seat. You can't move your legs. It's highly uncomfortable, and you can't just like get up. Now I'll get you there fast, but depending on how far you're going, like especially if you're going within like a what could be a day's drive. Let's say you're flying anywhere you could drive to in like 6 to 8 hours.
uh huh.
I'm starting to think the train's
I
better.
I would
You
agree
gotta
with you.
you gotta get to the airport early. You gotta get
Uh
out of
huh.
the airport, and it's uncomfortable. So like, not to say that that plane is faster, but sometimes I find that I actually have more time to spare than if I just take like I have more time to spare. That doesn't necessarily mean I need to fly.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I feel like the whole experience is so much less stressful too because you don't have to go through security checks or like you said get to the airport early or worry about like parking or anything. You just like roll into the Amtrak station, take the escalator, get on the train, and go.
It's so chill.
Yeah, I love it.
And you were pacing your brother.
I was so funny story about that. I got to go out there to watch my youngest brother complete his first marathon distance event. So that was really neat. But we had both registered for the 8K, which was the Saturday before the Sunday marathon. Um, and I had planned to run it with him, chat through game plan, like, hey, here's how you want to approach tomorrow. Just kind of go through the whole coach bit and set him up for success for his first race. Um, and and we got into the corral. We worked our way up a little bit, and it was like, I'm good if you want to go. I like put his headphones in and was just ready to do his shakeout run. And I was like, "Uh, all right, well then I'm gonna go. so
Weren't y'all
so
supposed to be like spending quality time on the run or something?
so I got to race the 8K. And then we had time later that afternoon to get him prepared for his race the next day. And kudos to him, he did really well. He came in just under 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Nice.
Great conditions, paced well, had a lot of fun. So it was a great weekend.
You know, we all want to know how you did in that 8K.
You know what? I surprised myself a little bit. I did. Well, I mean, I didn't know I was going to race until I was standing in the corral, 3 minutes ago before the race time. So, um, I was dodging and weaving a little bit on the front end just to get around some people and get some space. But I figured once I settled in, if I could run, under 35, I feel like that would be a nice strong workout.
Can you tell us a
Um,
pace for what a strong workout 8K is? Because like
so
no, we don't intuitively know 8K 35 minutes is
fair,
anything.
fair. So I was thinking, okay, let's just shoot for sub sevens, and like, okay, I wasn't ready to do this, so or like mentally prepared to do this. So like, let's just go sub sevens. Let's get a strong tempo in, no harm, no foul. But I felt really good, and so I decided to push a little bit, and I came in at a 6:27 pace, which put me just under 32 minutes. And I got top 10 in my age group.
Hey, there you go.
So
When we were talking about me and Leslie were talking about the first episode we did, and we were talking about you being fast. I was like, yeah, so tell us like how fast you
I
are. She
remember.
was like, yeah, he just completely dodged the question about how fast his marathon time was.
I did.
And I was like, yeah, I noticed that too, but I didn't want to press the issue on the pod.
No, I did. I
I was
I
gonna
don't
get it
know.
this time with that 8K.
Yeah, I'll give you that 8K for sure. I know I had a lot of fun. Once I got around the crowd, I had some people to pace with. Me and this one guy kept going back and forth, so that was a lot of fun. Um, I figured under 35 would be a good session. 33 would be a big win. And so to come in at, when I say under 32, I mean like 31:59. And when I say top 10, I mean 10 out of 10. But we got the job done. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Tim acts so modest, and I'm like, I know you like know you're fast, and I know you know that you want to try to do well. I want the juice. So we also like to open up the show with some coaching moments, and some lessons learned, some wins. So, a win I had recently, I was playing ultimate frisbee this weekend. I've been, over the last couple of weeks, picking up my training to be a little bit more consistent as far as sprinting and lifting.
Hmm.
And I've been playing ultimate for like the last month and a half, but I wasn't really like training. I was just kind of playing and using that as like a fitness day.
Okay.
But this past Saturday, a couple days ago, I felt like powerful. I felt fit, first of all. Actually, I wasn't like running out of gas, and I don't think I ate any more food than I ate the week. I think it was last weekend or the week before. It was 2 weeks ago. I don't think I ate any more food since 2 weeks ago, and I did not bonk out. I played for like 2 hours, almost 2 hours,
That's a
like
long
with
time.
with good energy. I think it might have been close to an hour and a half. But the last time I barely made it an hour a couple weeks ago, and I just felt fast moving. Like I just felt like swift, and like some of the guys. I mean, I'm definitely not as. So I'm debating if I want to try to go and try out for like a club team or even try out for the Thunderbirds
Oh
again.
yeah.
Like I don't know if I would make it to the Thunderbirds, and I would probably play like old man, like not a Masters team, but I'll probably play with like a club team that's like a bunch of 30-year-old dudes.
Yeah.
Because I don't think my ultimate IQ is good enough to play like temper or play pro right now, and I don't plan to put in the effort to like study that super seriously because I'm planning to do sprint track meets. Like that's kind of the thing
That's
that
your
I'm trying to
thing.
do
Yeah.
right now. But I know that as I keep getting in better shape for the sprinting, I'm gonna want to play some more frisbee, and I'm kind of gauging at pickup. At what point can I like dominate a game before I decide to even think about should I try to like do a
Yeah.
club thing? Because like I remember when I played for the Thunderbirds back in 2019, like that year, and even 2021 when I was still playing, I could go to pickup and be like top one, two, or three best player, and the other two people were like, if they were showed up that day, they were like other high level club players or like other people from the pro team that would like drop in, and I was like, man, I could like when you kind of play pickup, you don't play for any points, you just kind of just play around, and have fun, and then
Okay.
once the substitution number starts dropping about an hour, 2 hours into pickup, I usually go an hour late. So it's like they're already out there for like a couple hours, and like people start going home, they'll call a game to 7. And when they call the game, that's when you
Yeah.
kind of get
People go.
serious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I like throw or catch more than half of the scores?
Uh-huh.
But like I did not do that. Everybody, I did not do that on Saturday. I was able to play good defense, but my offense, I was able to catch and get open, but my throwing was really off. So, but it felt good to play, and
And it
like
feels good to feel strong, right?
feels good to feel strong.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, all right, I need to like practice. I'm like, oh, no, too much pressure. But some of the other things, I guess, learning moments. I did my USA track and field exam this
You
weekend.
did. You
So
did.
I did USA track and field. They have like this level 1 coaching cert. I did it in 2015 when I was in grad school, and that was the year they instated having to do continuing education for it. And because I think before 2015, it was once you got it, you
One
had
and
it
done.
forever.
It
It was one
was.
and
Yeah.
done. But I went through this whole trip. We've talked about this at the gym. We might have talked about this on this podcast, where I kind of went through this phase of like, I don't care about updating my certs and keeping them updated. Now I care, and like that took a while to get actually. So that was awesome. And another learning moment, I decided to teach my high school track team, teaching them how to do cleans.
Yeah.
I've been very hesitant to try to do Olympic lifting with them, from a how often I see them, but also just like the skill levels vary so much
I
and the groups are
remember
kind
you
of big.
saying that. Yeah.
But I think I did a decent job of
Yeah.
getting it. We did high pulls and a couple of them did cleans, but we'll get it by the end of the
What
year.
changed your mind?
Oh man, I didn't expect to talk about this on the podcast. There's a lot of older dice kids at the gym. And there's more sprinters from older dice at the gym.
Okay.
For the listeners, I coach at Obama, which is like a rival school. And so my first year at Obama, we had a really good group of senior girls, and we had a big chunk of kids who were like in college now from the gym that who went to dice. So that year, this gets into Donald's ego a little bit. So excuse me. In a nutshell, I want to try to claim all of the medals at District 8 championship for track,
Uh huh.
from the 100 to the 32. And also, just from a like, there's all these kids from older dice at my gym, which is great and it's fun. But like, I need to make sure my team can do all the same lifts that they can do.
Right.
Now they're all, paying, and they're all like clients, and they're like in small groups. There's not like a ton of them, but there's a lot of them actually compared to like probably the most I've
But
had since like
yeah, by
21.
percentage. Yeah.
And I was like, no, I need to like teach these lists to the kids at my school. I'm like, and part of the whole continuing ed that I'm doing right now, like this whole November, I almost every day, it's the 24th right now, probably like 20 days out of this month, I have read something about training science,
Yep.
sports science, from running to lifting, sprints, distance, all that. And like, so it's spurring my mind with way more things to do. So I decided, you know what? While the team is still small because it's November, I'd started redrafting up like how I want to do off season training right now.
Yeah. Um, is that whiteboard with all your notes on it? We haven't erased that yet, right?
No, it's
The
still
one we
there.
took a picture of. Okay, so if you're listening to this next time you're in the gym, ask to see the whiteboard with Coach Donald's notes. It's amazing. The thing of beauty.
But yeah, so I want to win. The district is small, so I want my kids to win all the medals.
Yeah.
But like the older dice, usually it's mostly distance kids that we have. We're getting an increased number of sprinters, and so now like I have to keep the upper hand.
Got it. Got it. Okay, understood. Now that you put it that way, I see where you're coming from.
So, all right. So, any learning moments did you want to share?
Um, I mean, we kind of covered the coaching highlight with this weekend. Um, I think the the big takeaway for me to kind of go back and revisit that was just like how it all played out. Now, like I think sometimes the biggest thing that you can do as a coach is to just step away and let things happen and not try and exert so much control over it. So like I had a certain idea of how things were going to go on Saturday or Sunday, but the athlete in front of me had different expectations, and they were calm and confident and felt well prepared. So I just dropped the issue, and sometimes I feel like that's, we want to like always be a resource, always be there, be involved. Like, what can I do for you to help you succeed? And
Mhm.
sometimes, the job is done and you just got to sit back and watch how things play out.
Yeah.
So that was neat to see.
Awesome. So next segment, we're gonna talk about some common myths. We'll get back to our single leg training. So I have two things to just chat about and share some thoughts on. It was really fun kind of doing some of the research to like look through this between research studies and coaching books, which we'll kind of get into. But a couple things for listeners that you've probably heard before, maybe you believe things that I have had different feelings about over time. Single leg training being only for balance drills or rehab. And the other thing is that single leg lifts should not be done with high loads. So you might see a lot of runners and athletes, they're like doing lunges with all body weight, or they're using really light weights and they're just doing a bunch of reps, or they're
Sure.
like, oh, my main lift is only going to be this back squat, and I'm only going to do some like single leg deadlifts or things like this, rear foot elevated split squats because I'm just doing a little bit of like, oh, I'm hurt or this thing is hurting. And these are things that like people like don't take very seriously all the time of like trying to train these exercises hard. And single leg training is good for power development and overall strength development. And you can train these exercises with high loads. And I mean high loads as in if you can back squat 400 pounds, you can probably do a split squat with well over 250.
Yeah, that's that math is amazing, and I know we're going to unpack that in a little bit here. But to go back to what you were saying about the this myth that it's just for prehab, rehab, balance. I think that's the mental image people get when they think about single leg training is kind of the work that you might see being done in a physical therapist's office, not the
Mm.
work that we would do at GHP.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then also again the loading issue, and I know we're going to dive into that and unpack that a little bit more. Um, but the formula, it's not a like half formula. It's not when you go bilateral to unilateral, you cut your load exactly in half, and that's it. You can do a lot with a single leg, and it will go a long way if it's done appropriately for your overall strength development.
Oh yeah. I want to shout out to two people. I want to shout out to Chris because he's the reason we're doing this topic right now.
Thanks,
Um,
Chris.
I was typing up this whole thing for Coach Tim and Coach Adam about doing this deep dive onto improving running speed, which we'll get to, and this other deep dive that I want to do all about metabolism and and like metabolism and all the energy systems and everything. And as soon as I sent the message, Chris came with this text like, can you talk about? I'm loving the podcast, dude. Can you talk about how all the single leg exercises? Like, what's the logic between why we're doing all this? And I was like, and he named SLDLs. I was like, all right, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
other thing I remember wintertime last year, I guess earlier this year, when Olivia was running some big times in the end of the wintertime and going into the season, she was split squatting like 135.
Yeah,
It was ridiculous.
yeah. She's strong.
But so deep dive topic. So I want to talk about a number of things here in regards to single leg training. So I'll try to what we did in the sprint episode that people seem to really like was going back and recapping as we go through.
Uh
So
huh.
first couple parts, we want to chat about how the neuromuscular demand can change when you load single leg lifts, particularly like lunges and split squats versus just bilateral squats. And then we'll talk about what's happening biomechanically when it comes to like sprinting, cutting, jumping, and all that. That makes doing this strength work so important. So first, how the neuromuscular demand changes when you load a single leg lift. You have to be able to keep your pelvis stable and keeping your whole body stable. So you get your adductors and abductors. It probably sounds like I said the same word. Your abductors, abduction, or those are like your glute muscles. So those you have three glute muscles. You have your glute maximus, that's your like butt. That
Mm-hmm.
you have your glute medius and your glute minimus, and you have a bunch of hip external rotators that go around your joint in your hip. And so those help pull the leg away from the midline of the body. Kind of get into some anatomy here. And you have your adductors. Think ADD. They add the ductors, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And those are your groin muscles and things. And so those actually have to work a lot more to be able to keep your pelvis. Like, you don't want your hip to drop. If you're watching a video,
Mm-hmm.
your hip to drop to either side when you're moving because you're going to have an energy leak. And so that also keeps the knees from collapsing in. And so being able to practice doing that single leg work, when you think about a lot of teenage girl athletes, they have like this knee valgus. Their hips are not usually as strong. Even just like honestly, teenagers in general and people that don't work out, their glutes are usually not that strong, and so their knees cave in when they're moving, and then their groin muscles aren't strong enough to actually support the weight.
Yeah, when you say all this, the word that is top of mind for me at least is just like alignment and like
Mm.
proper alignment. Because when you're playing these sports, you're you're not really you're rarely ever on 2 feet, unless you're like not involved in the action, right? Um, and so you need to be able to not just be strong on one leg, but to move well, and all of that comes with having proper alignment, and all of that proper alignment comes from practice,
Mm,
right?
yeah. And there's that whole like body wide coordination that's going on when you're on one leg and now things are less stable. You have to activate a lot of different things. So it's teaching your body how to be more smooth in
Mm-hmm.
transition of your movement. The other thing we want to talk about what's happening biomechanically, sprinting, cutting, jumping, that makes it important. Well, there's three phases of movement. We talk about eccentric work, concentric phase, the isometric phase.
Yep.
Eccentric, if we're thinking about lunging or squatting, it's going down into the movement. That's the eccentric portion. The isometric portion is the pause before you come back up, and coming back up being the concentric portion. When you're on one leg and you're playing a sport, you're having all three of these things happen very fast. And so your one leg, let's say you're playing basketball and you are, you take a cut step to then go to the hoop and then you actually go for a layup. Your leg is undergoing a lot of forces for all three. The rapid eccentric to hit the ground, being able to stay strong isometrically to get back off the ground, and then having the concentric power of getting in the air. Like you have to be able to deal with all of that on one leg across multiple planes of motion.
Yeah, in a very short period of time, right? Um, I think this is something that I've noticed you use a lot, Coach. And I don't want to gloss over it. It's the running, cutting, jumping. Like those three movements are expressed, across the board in pretty much every sport. But they're isolated in a degree, but there's so much overlap. Like the example that you just used with a basketball player might be like dribbling the ball down a court on a fast break, having to cut past the defender and then jump with the layup. Like they're going through all of those in it, like very, very quickly and very forcefully. And with all of that, like that's where if we're not training the body to not just maintain the alignment, but to handle that load or handle that force, like um, that's where you might risk injury, right?
Mm-hmm. And when you think back to some of our earlier episodes, that whole motor unit recruitment, how can you get your body to
Good
recruit
call.
all
Yeah.
the right muscles at the right time so that you can be smoother and more efficient even when you are doing all of those different things? So I like that you brought that up. And we talk about the different planes of movement, right? We have our frontal plane. We got to be able to handle going side to side. And some of these things are going to be rotational. Like you might
Oh,
jump
absolutely.
to catch
Yeah.
something and you are literally landing from turning in the air.
Yeah. I can see you experiencing that with flag football and frisbee, right?
Mm.
Like when you're already planning your next move while you're still finishing one
Yeah.
one move.
Whereas if you do that too much, though, you might drop the pass, but that's another story. Um, and you're landing on one leg, so there's control for landing. How do you keep your pelvis and your trunk under control? Can you make a catch, land, and not just fall over?
Yeah.
Do you have enough strength through your body system to land one leg and then the other, and then actually keep running after that without falling?
So let me ask you this before we go any further, just to provide some context. Is like obviously an athlete is going to get a lot of this experience through just playing their sport, right?
Mm.
Um, what's what's the balance there between like practicing by doing and being able to incorporate this strength training component to better practice? Like we talked about, I don't remember if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, um, about just like um, building the strength to be able to practice the skills.
I'm going to say that that's going to depend on where an athlete is in their development.
Yeah.
So, when you are a really good mover, let's say you're just a really good mover at 15 or you're 25 or you're 20, or you've been or you're even 40 and you've been playing a sport for a long time. There's a level of good movement that's there through that repetition. But then there's being strong enough to like handle the positions, and do you have the strength to, some people don't have the strength to actually do some of these things. They don't have the strength to land gracefully because their body just collapses onto the ground, and it's not necessarily a coordination thing from a how to do it. There's other people who might be older, they're maybe 35, 45, 50, still playing basketball or ultimate frisbee, and they know how to do it, but their body can't handle it anymore. So, being able to have the strength to also tolerate, it's a
Makes sense.
significant
Yeah.
load
Yeah.
landing from the ground.
Yeah. Tolerance is the imperative word there.
Now, something that I really want to chat about is why the body can actually produce more relative force on one leg than like we might think. I made that example earlier of being able to still be able to do a lunge with 250 if you can squat 250. Depending on how well trained you are from a how strong you are standpoint, and then how well trained you are with single leg training, a lot of really well trained people can get close to like 70-80% of their
Wow.
max squat doing a single leg squat.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about this because this is a concept that I didn't stumble across until a lot later on in my career. Like I assumed it was a linear,
Mm-hmm.
relationship. Um, so this was something that came to me a little bit later. So I'm looking forward to hearing your take on not just the what, but the how and the why.
So, part one of this is the individual leg has a higher activation that gets triggered to compensate for not being on the other leg. And so that one leg, you're actually going to get, first of all, the leg that's not working is still like contracting and helping in some fashion but like keeping you balanced. But that one leg, you're getting a lot more motor unit recruitment in that one leg versus for the same training effort than if it was two legs. So if you were doing a 85% 1RM squat, you would get more doing a 85% 1RM for the one leg by doing it by itself.
Because more motor
Mm-hmm.
unit recruitment.
All of the stability is required there. There's a lot of things I was reading on about like this. Your body is in a sense designed to be able to really operate really well on one leg. So it's actually able to get a lot of use out of that one leg. There was a term here, bilateral deficit phenomenon. When both limbs work together, the summed force is often less than the combined force of each limb working separately. And so essentially having both legs on the ground makes doing stuff easier, even at really high load.
See, that's a good
Maybe that's an easier thing to say.
not catchphrase, that's the wrong word, but like a good way to paraphrase, I guess. Two things I want to make note of here real fast before we continue to talk about this, coach, is like, one, if you haven't listened to our first episode, go back and listen to the first episode. That's where we talk about the motor unit recruitment and all of that stuff. So if you got a little lost there, use episode 1 as a reference point. The other thing you said, is that like we're designed to be on one leg because like the human body is designed for movement, right? And if you have 2 feet on the ground, you're not moving anywhere. Your 2 feet are on the ground, right? So it stands to reason that from just a purely biomechanical standpoint, like that a single leg can be, or the sum of your single leg can be stronger than both.
And even to your point about having 2 feet on the ground, you can operate well with 2 feet on the ground. But think if you were helping me move my car if I got stuck, you're going to be in a split stance or a staggered stance because it's easier to like dig in and push from a bent over position if you have your feet staggered versus if they're like together.
Yep.
And so being able to also utilize staggered stance positions a lot. Shout out to Coach Kino because that was something he was like, "You guys want to do some like staggered stance squats?" And I was like, "No, I need to teach you how to do like regular squats." But like now I'm thinking like, "Oh, I guess we could have did more of that." But anyways, even those jumps you saw me doing earlier for like the drill of the day, like
Yes.
thinking through like, okay,
Yep.
actually I felt really explosive actually doing the weighted jump squat in a stagger stance versus in a like square stance.
It's funny you say that because it definitely looked that way
And
to
I'm
me.
like, I don't think I
Yeah,
just got that much better.
yeah.
Maybe. Um, so what you mentioned about the motor unit recruitment also. So something else that I read, unilateral efforts recruit more supraspinal and corticospinal drive. Please, in a nutshell, you're able to get a lot more neurons through like I don't really know how to explain this very well. And when I wrote this down, I was not prepared to explain supraspinal and corticospinal drive. But in a nutshell, you're able to get a lot more like neurological drive to actually do well through the exercise, which is why it's not a halfway split in what you're
Yeah,
capable of.
yeah. I think that's a fair explanation.
Awesome. All right. So thinking about injury mitigation, because I think I mentioned earlier in the myth section that there's a people only do single leg work for the sake of managing injuries.
Uh-huh.
And well,
Prehab rehab balance, right?
uh,
That's what we think of.
it is good for that though. So all of that balance needs is going to help. Some of the things that just muscles that you're going to notice, your glute family. So all of those glute muscles are going to be stimulated really well.
I've never heard that term before. I love it. Your
Glute
glute
family.
family. That's good.
Your adductors, so your groin muscles, your lower leg muscles. So the muscles in your foot, your shin, your calf muscles are all going to be really well stimulated, and they can receive a little bit more stimulation than if you were just doing like a deadlift per se. And so doing like SLDL is going to challenge a lot of those muscles a lot more, give them a lot more attention. Hamstring muscles, so even like doing like a split squat, you'll have a little bit more drive there. And then your QL, your obliques, this kind of lateral line, because that's what's helping keep you balanced and stable. And so some of the research I was reading talked about even just like the importance of adding these single leg exercises either as secondary or as primary movers in your training programs, and how that really helps with dropping the incidence of injury. There's a lot more load tolerance. There's a lot cleaner movement when like these athletes are playing, especially as it relates to like ACL work.
Hmm. So that was going to be one of the follow up things that I wanted to chat about, and it's actually the next bullet point on our list. So I'll just use this as a lead in question or a transition. Is like, how do you program single leg movements? Are they primary? Are they secondary? Where do they come in relation to, if they are secondary, where do they come in relationship to a primary movement? Like how does this all, and I think maybe this will get to the root of Chris's question. Is like, okay, we understand why we need to do these exercises now. Why are we doing them the way that we're doing them?
I see. So it's going to depend on your overall program, first of all, and what's the goal of why you're training. So if you're in a phase where your goal of training is to make the line go up of like maximum force output, it's going to end up being secondary because you're going to spend that time squatting and deadlifting.
Yep.
If you're in a phase where you're doing a lot of in-season work and you're trying to keep athletes healthy, you might end up doing a significant amount of single leg work to just keep them healthy while they have a lot of training load if they're in the middle of track season or cross country season. Now, when we think about the other parts of like gaining that single leg power production, which is something that we're doing increasingly more, it's going to kind of depend on the program setup. So like right now for us, for our like power athletes, it's actually a kind of secondary. Well, for the day two program, it's secondary, but the like because we're doing cleans, but those cleans are more for technique and those are pretty
Yeah.
low lift,
Yeah.
and that's like really the heavy stimulus with a heavy isometric. Um, but you can make this the main movement. So like last winter, and I think during the track season in the spring, we were using the rear foot elevated split squat as the main exercise. And
Yep.
so that we were programming pretty close to how we would program two legs on the ground. So you can, but there's three main ways you can think about this. One, using rep maxes. So instead of trying to get a 1 RM on an exercise, you can do like a 5 RM and then base your percentages on that. So I just printed out a weight percentages chart to put on the pillar at the gym. Don't ask me why I waited till now to do that. but I did. And so it's there. And let's say you do a 5 RM on a rear foot elevated split squat, then you can figure out what the 85% lift is, or a 70% lift is, or a 93% lift is, and find it that way. Because you can't really do a 1 RM because you're not going to
Right.
like muscular fatigue, because you'll have balance fatigue. I don't know if balance fatigue is really a phrase, but you're gonna lose your balance and not be able to hold those stabilizers in place well before you
You
can't literally
fatigue your
move the load.
main mover. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So next time, if you're listening to this episode, whether you're an adult athlete or a youth athlete, I would encourage you to check the board and see like if it makes more sense to you now how it's written out
oh yeah.
now that you have this context.
So for those who are in the gym and listening to this, you'll see these A blocks, B blocks, C blocks, and so we do a lot of our programming. We warm up, so we go through our dynamic warm up. We'll stretch. We'll go through some muscular quote unquote activation exercises. I don't really need to just change wholesale to the word awareness because that's how I think of it. But activation is just so much more popular.
Yeah.
But like
But
awareness exercise,
awareness
like so
is
being
yeah.
able to really get those muscles stimulated and you're aware of them, and also just literally warming up,
I,
getting your
I
joints to warm up.
I like awareness better because it implicitly incorporates the activation
Mhm.
component and
Yeah.
then adds the I guess the mental side of it as well.
And then we go into some movement prep, and movement skills. So that depends on the population. So like a lot of our adults, they'll do a lot of med ball work. And the young athletes will do some med ball work, but I'm very big on plyos and running. So we work in some plyometric work, and we work in some sprint work. We'll work in drills. It kind of depends on the coach what their flavor is. With some of those things, like I think Leslie uses a lot of med ball work. I do a lot of like running drills and plyometrics in my session, but that's also like we just have different backgrounds, so that's
Yeah.
how that comes in. Where then we go into like doing the most high skill, high neural output exercises first after we're like really primed and ready to go. And so that might be an Olympic lift, that might be a full speed sprint on the treadmill, that might be some other sort of complex weighted plyometric or like some sort of combo at the beginning. It really depends on what time of the year it is. And then we get into that might also just be a main strength exercise. I'll say that. We might not do a whole lot of plyos. We might just go straight into like, all right, we got heavy split squats or back squats or deadlifts. So we get into that. And then our B, C blocks tend to be supplementary strength exercises. So the B block, depending on how the program is set up that day, that might also be just as difficult as the primary one, but it might be a different body part or a different movement. I mean, or it might be like upper or lower, and then everything else is going to be auxiliary or supportive, and so that's handling more single joint exercises, things that are going to have higher rep counts, or they might be more like abs, or might be more stretching, it might be more rehab type things.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of how the flow of that goes. So back to the programming. The other way you can program for the single leg is RPE. RPE is rate of perceived exertion. And there are some pretty good tie-ins for rate of perceived exertion based on the number of reps you're doing before like failure.
Okay.
So like a 10 RPE exercise, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. If you're going for a certain RPE, you want to be mindful of how many reps you're doing, I should say. If you're doing 5 reps, you can do an RPE of 10, which means that you are going to tap out in 5 reps.
At 5. Yep.
You could do an RPE of 7, which means you might have 2 reps left. So where like you can come back and do that again in a few in like 2 minutes or so. There's also another way you can look at this by reps in reserve, which I prefer using reps in reserve. RPE can be difficult for people to do until they have a lot more experience. Reps in reserve also is difficult, but you can literally test this out. So this gets into some of the rep max stuff that we've done before,
Yep.
where I want an athlete, hey, you're going to do these single leg deadlifts. And the weight that you pick, you need to only be able to do 2 more reps or 4 more reps or 3 more reps or 1 more rep. And based on that weight. Sometimes I just make them do as many as they can, and then we figure it out from there.
Yeah.
So hey, you're gonna grab 40 pounds, and you're gonna just do them until you can't with good form, and that's gonna be the rep max, and then we can figure it out from there.
Yeah. Um I think so. So this is actually, now that we're talking about this out loud, Coach, it's like this is one thing, and you and I had this conversation in the gym this morning about helping guide athletes towards like um, really dialing in the weight or the load that they use for specific exercises based on what we're trying to get out of those exercises, and how we as coaches can better help guide the athlete to do that by teaching them things like RPE and reps in reserve and things like that. And I hear you do this with the youth athletes all the time. Like after they finish a set, how many more do you think you could have done, right? And that gives us, it gives you a better understanding of where they're at with that exercise. With the adult athletes, sometimes it's a little less pointed. It's like, hey, how did you feel on that set? So like, excuse me, all of these very like all of these post set questions that we ask athletes in the gym are for a very specific reason, and that's to help optimize the what it is that you were trying to get out of that exercise.
And I don't infrequently just make them do as many as they can. Let's say we wrote for sixes, and I watch them, how they did the movement, how they got done with it, what they did before. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And I do this with the adults too. Cindy, that's usually if I don't see Cindy for a while, because usually I'm just not coaching her sessions. Oh, we're going to do as many as you can because I know you're going to pick up less weight than eventually. You're going to just do as many as you can so I can prove my point. Oh, coach, and it's not even her. It's kids too. Oh, I don't know if I could do more. Okay, cool. I'm not going to press you to add weight. Go pick that weight up that you just did. On the next set, you're going to do as many as you can. Sometimes we just add more sets. Not a lot more sets, like one more. Because I wanted to prove to them, like, that's what you think is your limit is not your limit.
Right. Right.
And I think a lot of kids, they get these preconceived notions of where their limits are, and they haven't actually tested them
Well, and that's how you can train or coach a novice athlete through RPE, like what it actually feels like,
yet. Yeah.
right? Like, and we see this with the runners all the time, right? Like once it starts to get uncomfortable, then for a novice athlete, they think, oh, well, this is unsustainable, and those two are not those two are not the same thing.
Yeah. So I want to recap through some of this. So we talked about how the neuromuscular demand changes as you load the single leg lifts versus bilateral lifts. You get a lot more adductor and abductor activation. There's a bigger body-wide coordination effort. When we look at what's happening biomechanically in sprinting, cutting, jumping, that makes this is important. On one leg, when you're playing a sport, you are going through all three phases of contraction: eccentric, isometric, concentric, in 3 degrees of motion. Your transverse plane, which is kind of rotational, your frontal plane, which is more side to side, and your sagittal plane, that's more front back. There's a very, very high amount of force output demand that happens on one leg in a very short amount of time. And so you have to be prepared for that, especially when it comes to landing and being strong when your body hits the ground. Your body can produce a lot more relative force on one leg than you think. That's well over 50% of what it could do with both legs on the ground. There's a higher neural drive when you are doing a heavy exercise on one leg. There's mechanical advantages in certain positions, especially when it comes to split and staggered stance exercises, to where even if you're doing a squat um, or a deadlift, or especially any like power exercise, or like sprinting, where, or not sprinting, that's a bad example, jumping perhaps, where having one leg in front of the other actually puts you in a better position to dig in, to push. There's this bilateral deficit phenomenon. So that's when, the summed amount of force from both limbs working together is less than the combined force of them working separately if you were to test them for the same effort separately. You'll see a lot of those lower leg muscles, the glute family, as we called it, also getting a lot of benefits in injury prevention so that you're able to keep your knees in line with your feet when you're moving, finding it easier to do that, and being able to tolerate a lot more load through those stabilizer muscles. Where if those stabilizer muscles are not strong and not being activated and being used very much, if you exhaust those too much while you're playing sport, your system's going to get weaker.
Yeah. So I made a mental note to bring up this example when we were talking about it, and I don't want to I don't want to backtrack too much, but I was working with an athlete just recently, and we were doing SLDLs, and they were saying like, "Man, I'm not really like I'm feeling the engagement in my hamstrings, but my and in glutes, but my hamstrings and glutes aren't getting tired. It's my calves and my feet."
Mm.
And so we got this whole conversation going of like, well, great. We don't want to overdevelop like your big muscle groups and your main movers if you don't have the support system in
Yes.
place to be able to do that. So just a real world example there.
Yeah, you don't want to buy a high performance vehicle, but like your tires suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the show for today. That's the main portion we wanted to chat about. We'd love for your feedback and thoughts on these things, and so hopefully those coaching considerations were helpful. If I were to kind of re-go back over, like, how do you program this? This is, if you look at your training block of your A block being like your meat and potatoes. Some people program their plyometric and skills and their A block, and then their lifts go on. We put that as a separate block itself of doing plyometrics, doing plyometrics on one leg and doing them on two legs.
Yep.
Being able to do your main lifts. If your main lifts are all on two legs, it's good to look at your secondary and tertiary exercises being on one leg. Um, and it's okay if the whole program goes through and is single leg for the whole day. That's fine. And that can be good. What I also want to make sure that I don't do in this show and make sure it's clear to you, listener, that doesn't mean don't do bilateral training. So there's these coaching books I've been reading, and right now I'm reading one from Mike Boyle. It was something about it was a newer book that he wrote about strength conditioning. It was a really basic book, but it was really good and it spurred a lot of ideas. And Cal Dietz triphasic training too. So as I'm reading through these books and even like some other like strength training for endurance runners and stuff like this, they're all talking about doing copious amounts of single leg training, and they're kind of almost, particularly Cal Dietz, getting into the point of like, you should just only be doing really heavy exercises on one leg, and I don't want to go down that path of like you shouldn't be doing deadlifts and squats. He does single leg cleans. I'm not saying I'll never do that, but
This is where
I need
we're
to
at right
practice that.
now. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
we're
is
not
this
there.
is where we're at.
Um,
It's not an
but
either or situation.
yeah,
We talked about this at the top of the show, and I think we were not recording at that point, but like that's the distinction that we want to make with this is like there's a lot of benefit to these unilateral exercises, but there still should be a balance of both.
yes. In the research that I was reading, I like reading a lot of meta-analysis because if you want to read more research, I highly suggest you start with meta-analyses because it's a clear through paper that summarizes a bunch of other papers and what their findings were collectively. That allows you to get a good understanding of what's going on, particularly if you don't have a lot of time. I'm not in grad school anymore. I'm not a grad student. And I think perhaps reading these meta analyses will be a good way to segue into like maybe reading more individual research papers. There's a lot more nuance and understanding is a good research paper being written. Was their sample size 5 people? Not probably
Right,
a great paper.
right.
But there's a level of trust and understanding that the people doing the meta analyses, they do a good job vetting, which, that's a whole other thing. But it's a good way to read this stuff without spending so much time reading a bunch of
Exactly.
individual papers.
It's a
This
good
stuff's dense.
it's a good starting point. Typically they're not too dense, and then you can go from there rather than trying to absorb all of these individual studies and overwhelming yourself with either how dense they are or just how many.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, but the research was saying that doing bilateral training does have good benefits as it relates to having strength, being able to, keep the body healthy. It's better than not training, and single leg training doesn't like blow it out of the water in regard to effectiveness for
Yeah.
growing power. And gosh, I'm doing Toastmasters. That should be better than this. And doing good work for injury mitigation. And so it doesn't mean throw out your back squats, but you should be able to spend more time doing a lot of single leg exercises and spending time loading them heavily.
Yep. I this has nothing to do with the unilateral exercises, but your comment there is just when I go back and I listen to these to do the show notes, I constantly am saying, why am I saying so much? Like I don't hear it in myself in the moment. And then I go back and listen, and it's like it's super prevalent.
Gotta embrace more
Um,
pauses over the
yeah,
words.
yeah, just exactly. But um, Chris, we thought that was a great question. We appreciate appreciate you reaching out and providing us with that. Hopefully, this gives you some insight and some context as to why we're doing what we're doing in the gym. It's not because we hate you and just want to torture you. We actually really like you and want you to get the most out of your training. So that's why we're doing this stuff.
Make sure, listener, if you haven't watched it already, get our Strength Training for Runners webinar. It's linked below. It is full of exercise demonstrations that you can be doing as a beginner when it comes to strength training for runners. We even talk about plyometrics, showing you how to program plyometrics, different types of plyometrics, and it's a really good deep dive onto how to write workouts, how to do the workouts, how to do the exercises. It's linked below. Check out the webinar, Strength Training for Runners. Our next episode, we are going to be getting into some running performance training, and so we're starting on getting an aerobic base. So that'll be what's coming next down the pipeline here. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Coach?
No, I thought this was great. Like I said, I think it was a great topic to explore, and hopefully we help answer some people's questions about it. And I'm looking forward to episode 6, aerobic base building.
All right. We'll see you later on. Have a good time. Oh my gosh, I'm still doing the arms. This is pissing me off. And I just said that on the show. Oh, but have a great time training. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you. Thanks for listening.